and I'll post something on the Facebook group. And even this week we did that. And within an hour, we had 70 responses to just a call to prayer. And so there's definitely this heaviness that's out there. And so what I feel like is our responsibility is that, man, I think it's really important that we help people see that there's also reasons for hope. And the reason for hope is the person of Jesus Christ. And in your life, when it feels like things are spiraling, when it feels like things are difficult, where you have a lot of questions but maybe not a lot of answers, he is where we look to hope. And so we thought, well, how can we do this? How do we do this? And so we thought, well, what we're going to do is over the next 7 weeks or so, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 7 miracles that frame John's gospel. And each of them is unique. Each of them communicates something about him that I think will be good for us to hold on to as we just kind of navigate uncharted times. And my hope and my prayer is this, that we would see Jesus, as the Bible says, that he is the source of our hope, that he's our reason that we can look at tomorrow with optimism. And so that's kind of what we're going to do, and it's super interesting as you consider these miracles and you consider these signs, because the first miracle that Jesus does, it's kind of interesting. The first one recorded in the God, he does a miracle at essentially a party. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to a party where maybe it was like awkward. You ever been to one of those where you're kind of sitting around and there's not a lot of common ground in the room and the host isn't really good at hosting. And so you're just everyone's just sitting there, looking at their phone, just waiting for the first person to leave, because once they leave, then you can leave. Unless you're that person who doesn't care and leaves, and I think I'm speaking for everybody and saying thank you for being that person. But you're kind of man, this is weird. And then you have that moment, right, where it's awkward, uncomfortable, and then the right person walks in, and all of a sudden what was kind of boring and lame and clunky becomes fun. Maybe you've had the opposite experience happen at a party, where you're there, it's great, everyone's having a great time, and then the wrong person shows up, and what went from being really fun and life-giving goes to draining, and everybody's looking for an opportunity to leave because this one person just happened to show up. That actually happened to Pastor Cassidy 2 weeks ago. He was that person. True story, it's really happened. So it's an interesting graduation season, okay? So there is someone on the worship team, a high school student, Grace, she had a graduation party. And there was, because of she has elderly grandparents, they decided because of the risk, they wanted to make the party just family, because they want to decrease the exposure that could happen, so they make it just family. So she sends out a message letting everybody know that the party is just for family this year. And to the family that comes, they all need to be wearing a mask because grandpa and grandma, they don't want them to get exposed unnecessarily to COVID. Well, Cassidy never got the text. Okay, so he shows up at this graduation party that is just for family because of grandpa, because they want to protect the elderly grandparents. Cassidy shows up, and everybody's and then the host is in a weird spot. Do we let him in? Do we let him participate? Or do we tell him that it's not for him? So they're gracious. They let him in. But here's the funny part. He forgot the mask. He didn't have one. So he goes to this party that he's not invited to because they want to protect grandma and grandpa. The one condition is that you have to wear a mask, and Cassidy doesn't wear a mask. For the rest of Grace's life, when she looks back at graduating high school, one of the sub-points is going to be, remember when Cassidy showed up at the party and made everything awkward for everyone? He had to borrow a mask from the family. And here's the part that I love the most. He stayed there for 2 hours. Yeah. And there's that happens. Like, we've all been to that situation where that one person shows up and they make it weird. But as we consider this story that we're going to look at in this miracle that Jesus is about ready to perform, the exact opposite happens. They're at this party. It's uncomfortable. It's getting ready to end. And Jesus steps up and he essentially brings the party. Let's look at it here. This is in John's Gospel, John chapter 2, and we'll start in verse 1. And it says this. It says, "On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.' And Jesus said to her, 'Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come.' And then his mother said to the servants, 'Do whatever he tells you.'" Like, that's such a mom move, right? Like, he's like, "Mom, not now." And she's like, "He's going to do it, just ask." Like, that's such a mom move. Now, there were 6 stone watering jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." And so they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water that had now become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you've kept the good wine until now." This is the first of his signs that Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory. And his disciples believed in him. Now, I know we're calling this series, "All I Need is a Miracle." And the truth is that the word that they use there to describe what just happened, they don't use the word miracle, they use the word sign. And actually, if you look at John's gospel, Jesus has a lot of miracles, but only 8 of them are described as signs. And that distinction is actually really important because a miracle is great and it's important and it shows us things about Jesus, but what a sign is doing is it's showing us something even more about him. And when you think about what's happening, like this is Jesus's introduction to public ministry. And if you think about like how you want to get started, it's a very interesting, maybe even strange way to want to get started. Essentially, he starts his ministry by helping out a family that didn't prepare well for their wedding. And when you think about even just him and the fact that this wedding is happening, we have to realize, though that's true, that it's a strange way to maybe step on the scene, but we also have to realize that in the ancient, like Middle East, weddings were a little bit different than our weddings today. That when we have a wedding today, it's about the bride and the groom. And the family's coming together, but really, let's just be honest, it's about the bride and the groom, and really even more than that, it's probably just more about the bride, isn't it? Now, in the ancient Near East, there was a lot more to it. It wasn't just about the family, though the family was involved. It was about the community. Because the more people that got married inside of a community, the stronger that the community would be. And so, the stronger a community be, that meant more resources. That meant more protection. That meant the more things that could happen to just build infrastructure in a community. So when people would get married in a community, the community would celebrate. That it was a joyous occasion that caused really pandemonium. And in most ancient Near Eastern weddings, like it would last for about a week. And so for them to run out of wine about 3 days in, I mean, that would have been catastrophic. That they wouldn't have been able to celebrate like they want to and people are used to celebrating. And we have to remember, too, that in our culture, this isn't always true, but generally speaking, there's a lot of grace here. Then that's an honor and shame culture with the whole community involved, that it would be very difficult for them to show themselves in the community because they would have been the ones who ran out of wine at their wedding. That this cause for celebration would have been tampered and hindered by their inability to prepare. It would have been very difficult for the couple. So there's definitely weight that this family is feeling. But even though that's true, it's still kind of a strange way to start. If you were a politician and you were wanting to kind of make your people know who you are, there's probably something there's probably something else you could do. But here you have Jesus pick this, and I think it's interesting because he picked it intentionally. And that's why that word sign is really important. Because the question is, okay, what does this signify? What is this miracle showing us today what Jesus wanted us to know about him when he did it? And so I want to look at just 3 elements of this story that show us what this signifies, okay? And just so that we can better understand Jesus and what he's doing. And my hope is that it will bring us hope as we consider this. And so the first element that I want to look at is I want to look at the element wine. Now, wine. Now, there's a little, and I use the word little there's a little debate over whether or not this is wine or this is grape juice. And I'll just be honest with you, personally, I feel very strongly that this is talking about wine. And there's a few reasons why. One is the word in the Greek. The word in the Greek is oinos, okay? In the New Testament, that word is only translated wine. So for it to be something different would be it seems like quite the stretch, if you ask me. And if you read the miracle and you read the context of the miracle, what does the master of the feast say at the end? It seems like he's talking about wine. He says, when he gets the wine that Jesus made, he says, man, most people wait to bring out most people bring out the good stuff early. You bring it out at the end. No one is saying that about grape juice. It's just more grapey. And even then, that's something that they would do at weddings. So what they would do is they would bring out the good stuff first, and then after people had quite a bit to drink, and maybe they weren't paying as much attention, they started watering down the wine, and people wouldn't notice because they were so far along in the week. And even just maybe on a personal level, when I think about the miracle itself, wine is a far greater miracle than grape juice. If it's grape juice, okay, if it's just juice, Jesus could go over to the jars and be like, hey, look over there, and just throw some Kool-Aid in there, mix it up, and no one's going to know. But if it's wine, that's quite the feat. Think about wine. Most wine, it takes 2 to 3 days for it to ferment. And red wine, actually, for it to be considered good, it takes 2 to 3 years for that process before it's considered good. I know this because I looked it up on the internet. And what Jesus did, he took a process that usually would take years, and he did it in the time it took to just dip the cup in the water. And what Jesus is showing us here is, what is this signifying? It's signifying that Jesus has power over creation and over time. You see his power over creation in that he's taking something that was created to be water, and he makes it wine. And you see his power over time in that he's taking something and creating something that is aged. And as you think about this idea, all I need is a miracle, you think about this idea where people feel hopeless and they want reason for hope, and we're saying to look to Jesus. Well, one of the reasons why we say to look to Jesus is because he isn't hindered in the same way that we're hindered. That where we have hurdles that we have to overcome, Jesus, he has power over creation and he has power over time. So no matter what we're facing, we can be confident as we look to him because he brings and gives us hope. But even then, so you see that in the wine, but you also see something just as profound that Jesus is communicating. What is he signifying? He's signifying that he comes to bring joy. Look at how the Old Testament talks about wine. Look at this. This is Psalm 104, verse 15. It says, wine gladdens the heart. And then in Ecclesiastes 9:7, it says this. We studied this a few months ago. It says, go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. So as you think about this story, you have this master of the feast who has one responsibility. And that's to keep the party going. To keep things fun. To make this celebration really count. And he is unable to do his job. And Jesus steps in and he brings the party. He steps in and brings joy where there isn't joy. And as I think about man, that is what we need right now. Where there's no joy, Jesus steps in and brings it. Now, it's really important that we realize this is not talking about this life necessarily. Do we get foretastes of the joy of heaven in this life? Absolutely. Absolutely. There are foretastes, but the fulfillment comes at the end. The fulfillment comes when it's all over. And it's so important that we don't, especially as we're talking about something like wine, it's so important that we realize that it's not Jesus' intention that we chase that fulfillment on this side of heaven. Because let's be honest, there are people who have used strong drink to try to fill that hole in their life. And Jesus is in no way advocating for that. He's just saying, I come to bring joy. And in his coming to bring joy, he's pointing us to a day where we will truly experience joy in its truest sense. And we see a picture of this in Isaiah chapter 25. Look at this. It says, on this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord will wipe away all tears from all faces, and the reproach of his people will be taken away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. This is a party. This is a celebration. That in Jesus stepping in this situation and doing what the master of ceremonies was unable to do, what he is showing us is that he is the ultimate master of the ceremonies. That he knows how to bring you joy. And that when this whole thing ends, it will be characterized by joy. And it'll be different. We've experienced this foretaste. We experience good things in this life. That not everything is a bummer. But even the things that are good, they're going to be better. I think of things like vacations. If you've been on a really good vacation, you're going to have one of two things are going to happen at the end. One is that you're going to be bummed that it's over and you got to come home. Got to go back to work. Or you're retired and you can't pay to live there. It ends. And even with vacations, thinking about things that are good, sometimes like you go to a really good vacation, and the last day, what are you thinking about? How ready you are to get home. Like he's pointing us to a day where that's not going to be our reality. That all we're going to be thinking about is, man, how's it going to get better from here? Oh man, it keeps getting better. This is amazing. Oh my God, it just keeps getting better. This is amazing. And then so you have that. You have this party. But what makes it different is that the weight of sin is gone. That the shame that we carry, the guilt that we carry from our sins is here no more. And so this weight that all of us feel that maybe we've just gotten so used to it will be gone. And it'll be like we can really breathe and we can really celebrate what we're experiencing. So Jesus is signifying with the wine that he comes to bring joy. And then the second element here that we see is we see the ceremonial jars. Now, he picked those jars intentionally. Like if you just kind of read through the story at a quick clip, it almost feels like he's like, okay, so Mom wants me to make some wine. Is there water in those jars? We'll just use those. Like that's kind of how it feels. But no, Jesus picked those jars intentionally. They were special jars. Look at this in verse 6. Now there were 6 stone jars there for the Jewish rites of purification. So part of this celebration in Cana, there were spiritual elements to this ceremony as well. And part of that would be those jars. They would use those jars because in ancient Judaism, what they would do is they would use those jars to essentially cleanse themselves. That would be part of the celebration. And those jars, they don't have water in it anymore. Those jars are now full of wine, and no one wants to wash their hands in wine. And so what is Jesus saying? He's saying, because I have come, you don't need him anymore. Because I have come, those cleansings that you used to have to do to try to make yourself clean, that is no longer necessary for you. That he is using that to point us towards what he ultimately does, which is cleanse us from our sins. I like the way that B. Milne mentions it in his commentary. It says this, it says, the master of ceremonies, exclamation, at the surprise of the quality of this new wine, compared to that served earlier, takes us to the heart of the sign and its meaning. The new wine of the kingdom brought by Jesus contrasts with the old wine of Judaism. Jesus changes the water of Judaism to the wine of Christianity. That what he's doing is Jesus is doing for that couple, for that family, what he does for us. They would have felt shame. They would have felt guilt. They wouldn't have been able to be involved in the community in the way they would like to be involved in the community. And Jesus steps in and removes the guilt and the shame that they would have felt. And that's exactly what Jesus does for you and for me. That deep in all of our hearts, we know that we need him to cleanse us. That deep in all of our hearts, we know that there's something that's just broken. And I'm sure that we've tried to fix it many other ways, but the truth is, at the end of the day, we can't. And Jesus, in picking that jar, is saying, I'm going to do for you what you could never do for yourself. And I don't know that any of us really like to admit that that's what we feel. I don't know that any of us like to admit that that's our experience or what we think is true of us, but the reality is that we know it if we just think about it. How do we know that we're broken? Well, I bet some of us know that we're broken because there's something inside of us, right, where we're always trying to prove ourselves. That we're always just trying to prove to people, hey, I'm look at me. Look at what I've done. Look at what. Why do we feel like we need to do that? Because there's something inside of us that doesn't believe it. There's a quote from the first Rocky movie. And Rocky is talking about fighting Apollo Creed. And he says, in essence, he's like, I just want to be able to make it to the end of the fight. I don't care if he knocks out all my guts. I don't care if he injures me really badly. I just want to make it to the end of the fight, because if I make it to the end of the fight, then I know that I am not a bum. There's something inside of all of us where I just want to be able to do this so that I know that I'm not a bum. And if you've ever proven to yourself that you're not, what happens after you proved yourself that you're not? You start to feel like you are a little bit later, and then you need to do something else to prove that you're not a bum. Or maybe we realize that we need cleansing because there's just something about certain behaviors that we know are wrong, that we know are devastating to our relationship with God and our witness. But as hard as we try, we just can't stop. We just keep doing them anyways. I was thinking about this, last week, I preached about unity. Talked about how we got to be careful how we portray Christ to this community. Talked about how we got to be careful what we say on social media, because you just never know, how what we're doing can hinder our witness. I just preached on that, and I was feeling pretty good about it. And then on Tuesday, the Big Ten decided to cancel their football season. And I'm sitting there, and I'm on Twitter. It was on Twitter, and I'm on my bio, it says, Ryan Goeden, pastor of New Life Church. And I'm sitting there, and it's taking everything inside of me to not educate the people on my opinion on what they should be doing with football. Remind you, I just preached on why that's a bad idea. I just preached on how that can hurt your witness. I just preached on how there are things more important than the ancillary issues surrounding us. And yet, I'm sitting there on my computer watching this story happen in front of me, and it's taking everything within me not to say anything. I'm proud that I didn't, but still, I wanted to. Why? Because I'm broken. Because there's something wrong. I know the truth. I know what I should do. I know how it hurts, but still in that moment, it just felt good. This is why he chose those jars. Because he chose those jars because he has the power to do for us what we can't do for ourselves, to truly cleanse us. Then we look at the last element here. The last element is just that it's a wedding. He picked a wedding. And what does a wedding signify? What is it pointing us to? A wedding is pointing us to the end. Because when this is all over, when we have experienced the fulfillment of this life and we are ushered into the next, it's going to be a wedding. It's going to feel like a wedding. It's going to be a joyous celebration. Jesus wants us to know. He knows how to throw a wedding. He knows how to throw a party. He knows how to bring us joy. And if there was ever a time where we needed to be reminded of that, it's right now. Look at what Jesus says in John chapter 10, verse 10. He's saying, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. I came to bring things to you that will bring you joy. That's why he came. Like we live in a day right now, right, where it seems like all of the things, or a lot of the things that bring us joy, like are in one way or another either being taken away or being tweaked, right? And because of that, people are frustrated. I like the way that my friend John Baker talked about this on Facebook, actually. He's just talking about why people are so frustrated. I want to read this to you. He says, when you strip away all the positive constants in people's lives, their church, their family get-togethers, school, going out to eat, game nights, I'm just going to throw Big Ten football in there, and the only constant in your life is interacting with frustrated people, it's probably because they're frustrated because they don't have any normalcy in their lives either. That everything, the joy has been sucked out. And what Jesus wants you to see, there's going to come a day where I'm going to put it all back. In the same way that we are discovering more and more things that we can't do, more and more things that we like that are being taken away, Jesus is pointing us towards a day where the exact opposite will be true. Where instead of discovering things that we love being taken away, we're actually going to discover things that we love that we didn't even know that we loved. Or he's going to show us more and more things that he created just for our enjoyment. There's a picture of this in Revelation chapter 19. It says this, Hallelujah, for the Lord God Almighty reigns. Let us rejoice and exult and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted for her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. And the angel said to me, Write this, Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, These are the true words of God. That Jesus, he reigns, and they are celebrating his reign. Why? Because he uses his power to bring them joy. Where he'd have every right to make them grovel, to make them frustrated, to make them pay for all he had to do and go through. But instead, what he does is he uses his power to throw a celebration. That he picks this sign so that we will think on these things. And so as I close this morning, we got the big picture. The wine brings joy. The jars show that we need to be cleansed. And the wedding shows us how it will all end. That's true. And that's good, and that's important for us to consider, but you have to still look at the situation. And the situation that's there is you have a wedding, you have a family with a lot riding on that moment. I don't know if you've ever been to a wedding. I've been to quite a few recently. And when it's your wedding and something's missing, it's kind of catastrophic, isn't it? It's kind of a big deal. When it's not your wedding, it's not that big of a deal. Like, okay, so we have one less corsage than we needed. Aunt Susie will be fine. She won't wear the flower. When it's not your wedding, you're like, okay, so the ushers don't know how to dismiss. That's kind of funny. You're not supposed to dismiss the groom's side before the bride's. Come on, dude. Like, we told you that 17 times at the rehearsal dinner. It's not really that big of a deal. You forget about it at the reception. But man, when it's your wedding, you forget that corsage. threat level midnight. Someone messes up the seating. Oh man, mother-in-law is giving them a what for? Why? Because it's yours. Because you're intensely committed to getting this right, because it is your day. And here you have Jesus do for a couple on their day something incredible. He gives them the ability to continue to celebrate when really what they should have experienced was shame and guilt. That's what Jesus does for you. He gives you the ability to continue to celebrate. But he also cares about little details that maybe only affect you or affect you differently than they affect other people, but he cares. And so as you sit here and you look at your life and you consider it and you feel like all you need is a miracle, whether it's big or small, he can do it all. Would you pray with me?
Hey, New Life Online community, thank you so much for joining us for our post-service hangout as well. We just want to thank you guys for being part of everything that God is doing right here at New Life Church. And if you enjoyed the service today, what's a good emoji for them to drop in the comments? Putting you on the spot.
Fire.
Fire emoji.
Fire emoji.
Service
Classic.
was
Is that
fire.
what fire?
That's yeah. This is the fire emoji.
Okay.
It's
good.
because service was fire.
Yeah. Drop the fire emoji.
Drop the fire emoji. Guys, we just want to remind you of a couple of things that are coming up right here at New Life that you can be a part of. Next week, we've got our back-to-school party. What do we have free for our students and our teachers?
London Calling food truck.
What?
So good.
London Calling
you
food
do not want to
truck.
miss it. We will be posting a Facebook event here in the next day or two, so be sure and watch for that. RSVP.
Make sure to check it out.
Invite your friends, all that jazz.
All of the things on the social medias. Also,
Tonight, if
is a
you've
big
got
night.
youth,
It's a big night.
incoming sixth graders,
Sixth grade and up.
outgoing seniors. It's a big night.
Big night.
We're celebrating with a 2000s party.
2000s party. Move
I am
up day.
stoked.
It's gonna be hype. That's a cool word, right?
For like the 2000s?
No, like what's a cool 2000s word?
Fetch.
Fetch. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that store, Abercrombie and Fetch.
Fitch.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
I think.
I'm
I
pretty
don't
sure I had
know,
a shirt.
but I do know that service this morning was incredible. It's
Yeah,
so
look at all these
cool.
fire emojis.
Boom, 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 fire all around. It's so cool that we get to look at who Jesus is, what Jesus does through these miracles in the Gospel of John. And it shows us that Jesus is able to do miraculous things for us, even in this season. It's good news, right, Molly?
It's very good news.
It's very good
and
news.
even greater news. Not even greater news, because that's pretty good
It's like
news.
Jesus is the best
But-
news, but
Even though you are joining us online, even though you're at home,
yes.
there are still
Yes.
ways for you to support what we are doing right here
That
in the
is
building
exactly
and online.
right. There are 3 different ways for you to do so. You can mail your gifts, your giving into the church.
Haven't heard that in a while.
I know, haven't heard that in a while. There's 3 ways, though.
You can.
That's a way.
Yep.
You can obviously give here in person if you are here in person, but then also you can give online by visiting giving.nlspringfield.com, or you can text the number 84321 with the amount that you would like to give, where you'll be taken to a page to confirm that transaction with your bank.
Yep. And I know that, this season is kind of weird and different, but
So different.
we hope that through these hangouts and through your tithing and through just that sense of community, we hope that you guys still feel connected.
Yes.
And if there's any way that we can help you do that, reach out, let us know. We're happy
Absolutely,
to do that
because we
too.
want you to feel like you are as here as you can be wherever you are. We love you guys. We can't wait to see you right back here live online at 9:30 next
Yeah.
week.
See you guys then.
Bye.
Miracles in our lives today. And you know what it is that each person in this room needs, mostly to draw closer to you. And so I pray that you would help us to do that this week.